Hey guys, Master Xeon here, and in this video I'm going to be going over the time lapse in which I modeled a car, but before that, to show the inspiration that even got me started, was this blog. Now, the images that I saw here I found to be just spectacular. Most of them were spectacular, but for the most part they inspired me to begin working towards mastering cars, and even kind of showed me that I can go any direction I want in the way that I want to model. And if I follow certain rules, I could have it look like a car. This one's probably my favorite. But this is a blog that actually inspired my car creation. So all of these images are just unbelievable. And as you can see, some of them are mainly smooth, like they could be a suppository, and then like this is how would this car work. And even things like this, but this one's also a really nice one. So this goes on and on. So over in Blender, this is basically the curve network that I built using just images of cars, front, side, left, and right as like not so much a reference, but a visual guideline as to the rules of the contours and forms of how a car should be. And so not to say that my car is perfect, but this is my first study on it. So of course, if I come back with another one, it will definitely be a trillion times better. But this is the network I started with. So when it comes down to curves, jump on layer 5. Let's see, we drop in a curve, line to view. One thing you notice about curves when you're editing them is these humongous splines. So if you just press W with them both selected and choose set curve radius, you can actually set this to be something more reasonable. Also, if I press Control Alt U, in my preferences I also have continuous grab enabled, which enables me to slide values and not worry about hitting the side of the screen while sliding things. So like if I was scaling it, I could actually pull the mouse out of the other side of the screen repeatedly until it's the value that I want, even though its value is higher than what I'm actually capable of doing without scrolling. So these are things I just want to explain. Another thing is that you can choose a handle and press V. Now allow you to change it to vector, in which you can work in a more straight line, which is something I did around the windows just to get it straight. So, I'm just explaining this in advance. And the other thing is, the better the handles point at each other, the less overshoot you have to deal with and strangeness in the curves. So whenever it came to building networks of curves, I can't literally extrude from the middle of a curve. So I would have to duplicate RZ, rotate it on its um, little origin here. Then I can extrude this out, and by making sure both of these are pointed directly at each other, it's like there's an extrusion here. But you want the curves to be continuous for some of the main forms when it comes to making a car. So, that's how I pretty much got that thing down packed. And so I'd look at it from the front, straighten it up, and then, come over here, make sure I grab the right curve. That's not it. That one is. So from the side, I could also extrude down, and just by tweaking these handles and making sure that they're vector and aligned and automatic, I'm able to get a good amount of control. And this is good practice for when you're going to be in the graph editor, fine-tuning animation, and you need that curve understanding, which curves is something I've gotten pretty good with in Blender, but I remember my first adventures with curves in Photoshop using the pen tool weren't as enjoyable, but 3D, it's a different game. And then the other thing is I could press Alt-C and convert the curves to a mesh, Alt-C, mesh, and now I have these. Now these are not connected, but if I remove the doubles, it'll somewhat connect the ones that are overlapping. However, the resolution isn't exactly what I want it to be. In fact, there's a lot of points here, so you can also increase this, and this will kind of decimate your mesh, which sounds kind of crazy, but for some areas, like let's say here, it actually worked out quite well. Like you choose a straight line, you just reduce your points. GG lets you slide a vertex up an edge. And then if I needed another vert here, I would press W and subdivide, add in another vertex, and just slide up and down just to get it perfect. Because, you know, you have two curves next to each other that you converted to a mesh like this. They're not going to have the same amount of points. One of them's going to be like this. And so if you try to F2 your way to success by just connecting an edge and F. Oh, come on, I don't have F2 either. So I reset Blender back to defaults earlier, and it just hasn't been the same. There we go. So we fill a face, maybe. And here we go. So I just keep pressing F2 and it'll keep filling faces. However, this one needs to be realigned. This one needs to be realigned. This one needs to be realigned. And so this is pretty much what you're going to be seeing me do throughout this entire video. So I'm just giving you an intro, just kind of explaining some things. And so, you know, for this line here, this is a lot of geometry just for the initial block in. So you can press X and just remove the edge loop after holding Alt and, you know, clicking to select that loop. And it keeps it a lot more simple. And then you see me go in a lot with the knife tool and just make it straight. So this part, you know, there's a bunch of vertices here. I can press X and dissolve them, and that will actually keep the edge and get rid of the verts. And, you know, that's how it goes. The other part is snapping. Snapping is with the magnet. You can change it to vertice, and that will allow you to snap to a point. If the magnet's on, it'll do it automatically. If you press Control, let's see, what is the shortcut? Maybe there's not one. No, there has to be. Shift tab, sorry. Where's my mind today? I've been actually using a lot of Moto, so my shortcuts are messed up. However, alright, so by holding Control, I could snap these, and then Blender now has this auto merge, which if you just snap it somewhere, they're merged. And so you see me do this a lot throughout the video too. And, you know, for the most part, I'll explain just some of the techniques that were involved, but, you know, that's pretty much it. So the other thing, let me undo that, is, you know, I'm just going to put an edge loop here so I can just turn this back to just a network of edges. If I Alt-C and convert this back to a curve, you know, this is your curve. Over in your panel, you do have options over the resolution that it comes out as in the end. So if I wanted to increase this, then when I press Alt-C and change it to a mesh, there's more points involved now. And so whenever you're dealing with a normal set of curves, like this one, and we take it somewhere, you know, get rid of that obnoxious spline size, and if you start tweaking it, you can see how its resolution changes. And so before you convert it to verts, if you leave it up at 12, you'll find that there's a lot of verts you have to deal with. And so that's something I've also found throughout the modeling process. So if we go back to layer 1, with those techniques of just pulling them around, building the top, building the side, contouring the door, and using snapping to get them directly where I want by, let's say I wanted to, let's say this curve was up here when I built it and it's not correct. Well, if I want to get it here, I'd Shift S, put cursor to selected, select divert, and choose selection to cursor, and then voila. So by looking at it from the top, you would be able to correctly, you know, get your lines in line because, you know, the car door does have a curvature. The top is not so boxy. It does come in, so there's these planes, you know. I always talk about planes of the face. This one's about planes of the car. So without further ado, let me go ahead and start up PSO so I have something to do while narrating. So my main screen is 42 inches and my second screen is 15 inches. So the other one's kind of like my heads up display or something, but got to shrink down PSO for it. Just let this load. And so let's begin. So my default scene is a circle, meaning as a ball, a light, and a floor. And I go in and delete that. So that's pretty much my cycle's equivalent of the regular default scene. And of course, clear everything out, drop in a Bezier curve, line the view, like I was explaining earlier, and set my goal weight. And from here, just begin building my car's contour. So I look at it from the top and I move it away from the origin so I have the power of mirror. Since I realigned it, it's on the Z. But at this point, mainly I'm just looking at images on the other screen, my heads up display, like I was saying, of cars, thinking of what curves I'd like to incorporate. However, the main goal was to get the shape because by using curves instead of polygons, I have these handles to play with. And it gives me a little bit more versatility than using polygons, which, you know, with polygons, I could do the same thing by selecting verts and edges and using a proportional editing tool, but the accuracy just would not be there. And so now having the mirror in the middle doesn't actually mean anything as far as getting these to connect, because in the end I delete the second half, but the mirror is good just for the purposes of looking at it. Well, PSO is giving me an error, so it looks like y'all might have my full undivided attention for narrating this video. But, you know, there's really not a whole lot to explain here. It's just, you know, tweaking curves. But once this video completes, maybe I'll show you all my failure gallery, because this video was a third time recording. The first two recordings, actually, I messed up horribly halfway through the series and just completely broke rules of what a car should be. And the car just looked like something a human would not be able to fit in. Not to say that they're failures, they're failures. So really, when it comes to these curves, it's all in the snapping. Once you have them all connected, then by tweaking the handles, you can add your bulges, your creases, and just define certain aspects of it. So I thought that this might be an easier way to try modeling this. I'd been reading a lot of things about car modeling and other software packages like Modo and Maya, and one of the Maya ones had shown an idea of building it using curves, and not that it's new or anything, but it's not a workflow that you see a lot, because, you know, curves in Blender don't get much love. Like NURBS. When was the last time NURBS was updated or anything useful was done with them, or meta balls? But I say that, and I'm sure that there is a purpose for them. So we could stand to speed this up a little bit. So remember, to harden up the curve, you would change it to vector, and I'm just making sure that everything's lining up from the side. I see that the area that's allocated for the windshield's looking a little curved, so I'll be fixing that. This one is going to be the general outline of the what I call the middle bulge of the car, because the windshield isn't completely flat. I've seen in pictures is more rounded. But this curve here will be the side crease. So, you know, cars usually have a bevel on the side. And now I'm beginning to trace the outline. This area here is probably one of the hardest parts of cars. The second hardest part for me is probably the side and the back. Just because of the geometry involved, it tends to just get a little messy. And then when you subsurf, it also pinches horribly and becomes a nasty mess. So when I was looking at the designs of cars, I was looking at coupes and mainly two-door sports cars as my reference images. So that's pretty much what the contour that I'm going for here is. Um, Also noticed in a lot of top views that the window curved out from the base and pretty much goes out on the, I guess what would be the x-axis here. So you'll notice me look at it a lot from the top and tweak the overall curves a lot just to make the wheels relevant. This one will be the crease that goes around the door that will also indicate the top of the roof beginning. Just keeping it rounded and somewhat in the same shape as the primary curve. And I was trying to go for an interesting type of door design, but I didn't want to get too different in fear of making an absolute failure out of this. So more curve tweaking, and at this point I snap, should snap, maybe I snap, maybe I don't. Sometimes I watch these and I feel like it's a different guy, but you know, subdivide the curve, use the same origin, don't move it no matter what, but tweak the handles so that way they're interconnected. And then if I need to move that area, I'll just use the lasso select or just shift double click or something. Tracing the door is important. There's a lot of important shapes in the door as far as um, bulging it out and not making it look too flat, which is what I was thinking about at this point. Damn it. In other news, the House just passed a CISPA bill. That's no good. Alright, back to the video. So, more of tweaking the curves, getting them to fit. I want the back to be somewhat rounded, but not too rounded. And even in this video series, I do make quite a few mistakes that I'll be improving in the subsequent videos. I believe I've already put up the second time lapse showing this content being made a lot faster with something more entertaining to my voice. But yeah, all in all, it was actually a quite long project of making it 9 hours in total. But initially my goal was to try to do this all within 1 hour, just the whole block in quick creation. But it just really requires a little bit of finesse and to really get everything to look right, because these curves are your structure, so you want to spend time getting to know them. Like I said, you can also put in a circle and toggle the cyclic feature to have a circular shape to start with and then open it up. And so I'll tweak these into shape, get them where I want. I'll duplicate it to build the indication of the, the crease that goes around the wheel area that I see on a lot of cars. Just more tweaking, more tweaking. And so this is the second one that will indicate the wheel crease. And with the power of curves, I'm able to create a curved surface a lot easier than, like I said, if I was using polygons. So that's one thing you'll notice throughout this is just kind of the ease that curves give you once you control them well. So I'm sure in the future I'll be able to make the whole car using curves, and then by filling the curves, and I'll have the full form without having to go through so much tweaking at the end, which was my goal with this. But I was still fairly pleased with the result, especially because cars can be quite difficult to make due to their complex planar shapes that are required, along with the curves to just indicate things, and not to mention all the knick-knacky little details, everything from radio antennas to car seats to steering wheels. To be honest, I was actually going to make this video and call it building a car from the inside out, because in the initial video I actually built the entire interior and then used a curved network around that to build the exterior. But like I said, all the videos that I made in preparation of this one became horrible failures at some point, whether it was because I was tweaking an area just too long, like maybe 40 minutes too long on something that should have actually taken only moments, which brings me to the next point. You know, stepping away from the render or stepping away from the canvas is something that is one of my more recent lessons that I've learned. I actually spend quite a bit of time on Blender, enough time that the people that know me are concerned about it. However, the process of stepping away and just doing other things also has helped me just kind of wrap some things in my head and get it down. So, be sure to take your occasional breaks throughout this process, which I think also kind of hurt me on some of my other videos. And so from here, I actually extruded the curve out, but it actually is a lot of work to get the curve to fit exactly somewhere in space. If you don't have a snapping point, you're just having to look at it like I am. However, it does work out because you can always, once you turn it to vertices, just, dissolve verts, then re-add them as they're needed, and just shrink the amount of geometry you have to deal with. And begin tracing the back. I'm starting to become a little shocked at how long it actually took me to go about this, but spending a little bit of time actually caring about the final render will definitely help you, especially if you're making up a car. So using box select and lasso select, I'm selecting portions of the car just to tweak and get it to look more like the shape that I want. And through the control of handles, I'm able to get everything aligned pretty easily. So someone was asking in the comments if it's easier modeling using curves on a car, and I'd say the answer is heck yes, because I tried a lot with polygons. Like, I'll have to make a video showing all my failures, seriously, on this project, just to further encourage y'all to give this a shot, because, practice makes perfect. I think at the beginning of my whole 3D career, I think I spent too long watching videos and not enough time getting acquainted with the software. So now using the stuff is almost like a big shock sometimes. So when I talk about F2 and my way to success, I'm talking about Bart Crouch's add-on that is a sequel to the F key, as I like to look at it. And basically, you select 3 verts, you select 4 verts, you press F. With this add-on, you select an edge, and wherever your mouse cursor is hanging, on which side is how you'll fill it. And so it looks super easy right here, and it is literally that easy. And by just controlling the amount of vertices that are between each of them, making sure all the planes are the correct length, it's short work to model a car. And more tweaking. So this area right here that I'm working towards, where the rear window, the wheel, and the trunk, and this whole meeting area is one of the more troublesome parts of cars for me. Um, so this is something that I think I improved upon over all my previous models of trying to attempt cars throughout the making of this one. So when dealing with curves, you have to watch out for double edges. Double edges under geometry will just drive you bonkers. And it is no one's fault but yours when you have them. You can also remove doubles. You can raise your threshold to grab more doubles. But, the best ones are the ones where you use the knife tool and there's a secret vertice under your vertice. And these are new things that have happened, that have started happening since B-Mesh became implemented because of how radical a change it was. Which, I remember my first experiences with B-Mesh were quite significant, to say the least, because it was just so different going from having a 4-vert limit to having just infinity, and just having these faces that have an infinitesimal amount of verts that have no true shape but are there. And, you're like, what shape is this face? You don't know. And, I'm probably just sounding like I'm rambling nonsense, but, you know, modeling is something that takes a lifetime to master, unless you're Jonathan Williamson. So, continue to fill in, adding edge loops where needed, adding verts where needed, grabbing and sliding verts where needed, joining them where needed, making sure that they're joined at the correct location that I want, because this is the initial form. So, edge flow is important. That's why the curves also help, because the edge flow is a lot easier to control if you specifically have your outlines all set up. It's like, maybe I should try building a human face with curves. In fact, I'm gonna pause this video and be right back. No, just kidding. But that might be something. Modeling a human with curves. I'm gonna have to check into that. So just filling in the faces, looking at it from all sides, making sure that, the right planes are coming together, because, like I said, this is the foundation for the rest of this model. And it's important to keep the verts as simple as possible, but but not so much that you simplify the model too much and lose what you've been working towards. Right here, I begin dissolving. There's too many verts needed here. We'll just snap, snap, dissolve, snap, dissolve. So the auto merge editing is important here, because a lot of them I just snap to each other and they just automatically merge without any effort whatsoever. So it's these little tips that speed up the modeling process and make Blender my preferred choice for building things. Um, Also, like y'all probably know, I also use ZBrush and other software too, but Blender, of course, is open source free. It's the first 3D program I ever used. So moving around with the middle mouse button and not having to press Alt or hold Alt and press Control to zoom and stuff like that is definitely something I'm not used to in other applications. But it is good to spend a little time working on mastering a professional suite, so that way you might be relevant in a professional world, or at least that's my philosophy on it. So maybe someday I might expand out, start doing something on a more professional program. But that's to say that Blender's not professional. I fully believe that someday this program will be used in game studios and job applications will be asking for people to have skills with this particular program because of all the features that are being added. I mean, you hear about something that you wish was there, and then you come back and you see that it's there. Adventures in Blender is one of my favorite news sites for Blender related news next to Blender Nation, because Adventures in Blender is, he goes over every little update that happens to the program, from the freestyle merger to subsurface scattering being added to the auto merge being put where it is now. Like, these are all just small things, but I love being able to understand how rapidly the program's evolving, because as it evolves, so is your workflow. And Blender's just ever growing. Like, I would hate to be away from the software for a month or 6 months or a year. Could you imagine the updates you'd miss? Cycles would be 300 times faster and be replaced with something else. You would just become irrelevant. Alright, so more vertice snapping. For verts that I just pull out randomly, of course, I use the X and Y snapping to snap them to specific locations in which I then slide and fill in the faces. And a little bit of tweaking. I don't want to do too much tweaking at this stage, since I am establishing the main foundation of what I'm going to be tweaking for the next 6 hours afterwards. So, I don't want to mess up the topology too much. However, there are some things in the trunk that I feel like could have simplified even in retrospect. Like, I believe someone had commented a while back about how to model cars like in GTA. I'm pretty sure the result at the end of part 2 is probably good enough for you to use in a video game. However, all the things afterwards are definitely for, a production quality render, just something you would want to add to your collection of renders, which, I'm nobody. I don't even have a show reel or a demo reel or any reel. I just have all these videos, but it is something I'm working on. I'm also working on getting a web page so I can begin hosting there instead of just being all up on YouTube. So this is the number one most difficult area of the car, and you'll see me do quite a bit of tweaking here, because I think it is one of the first things that the eye locks onto when they look at a 3D model of a car, is just how to Windows transition. And in just a moment, you're about to see me select all of the um, edges in the perimeter of the driver window, and then fill it with a face, and then press I to extrude inward. And by doing that, I'm able to get a nice proportional edge loop that does not, instead of just extruding and scaling, which doesn't get you the desired results, you can just inset it and it'll actually come out a little bit more smoother and actually interpolate between the two edges a lot better. So I kind of thought the notches would be a nice touch, but as you can see, I quickly filled the top one in, but I stick with the bottom one. So for dealing with that same technique of insetting on the mirror, you would have to fill in those the two verts in the center, and then fill the faces and then connect them like you saw there. For this, I snapped the cursor using Shift S and selecting the two at the bottom, snapping the cursor there and then scaling at that, so that way I have more control. So Blender's new matte caps features are spectacular when it comes to just sanity checking your renders to make sure that your creases and details aren't looking unnatural. So right now it doesn't look too good, but once it gets subsurf, you'll see that this feature is absolutely essential, and it's great of Ton to add this. So with the knife tool, I'm just adding in cuts to go around the door, since those are going to be detached and modeled separately and then re-added. And here's an issue where I'm dealing with several doubles and just craziness with geometry, like I was warning you earlier. And so the card design at this point is free. I'm free to do whatever I want. I'm free to stick something on it just using shrink wrap project and cut that into it, which I was wanting to use the knife project on this to showcase it, but I wasn't able to figure out how to get started with it, which it is a new feature, and hopefully I'll be able to show it in the future. At this point, you see me actually use the bevel to expand on some edges so that I can cut in like a tail light area. So this still is what I consider the blocking in stage. But the bevel tool is something that the way it is now is new to Blender, so I still use it frequently randomly in places where I just knife and extrude to just see what I'm able to get out of it. And as you can see, the hood is starting to take on I vomit in my mouth to say, a Bugatti Veyron style look, but that's something that I definitely tweak down the road. So anything you see on it now that you hate, just know that I have full versatility. In fact, another fun part about this was after this whole modeling video, I just redesigned just several small aspects one by one just to have variants of the car. I realized that I could easily create like a whole garage of these puppies and just be manufacturing cars. So here you see me just cutting out pieces. I cut out the door just to keep that simple, and now I'll just build a connector for the window assembly. And these are just small parts of the car that I've never taken into consideration before when modeling, and just stuck with the exterior and ended up with a overly simplified model that had no resemblance to a usable car. So I try to take it to the next level in this one. And as you can see at this point, auto merge editing's on. However, it snaps sometimes to the wrong location, so it gets weird, and you have to just merge them manually, but it's no biggie. Just glad auto merge is there for whenever it is useful. So at this point I extruded in, however, the vert counts had somehow gotten off, so I'm trying to equalize it here so that I can have a clean extrude inward and, you know, keep the topology clean. However, doesn't exactly go like that. I still end up off by 1, and I just fill it, close the window on it. Right here I don't want it to have that shape, so I use the knife tool and just try to quad it off a little bit. Now with the knife tool, it's important to keep in mind that if you want to cut completely through a model, press Z. If you look at the window at the bottom of the screen when you press K, it'll actually tell you some of the options you have for it, like Z cut through. And these are things that I didn't know until recently, which is strange because, you know, I should know these things, or never noticed. Isolate the hood, go ahead and extrude this portion inward. That shape that you just saw of that N-gon face that I deleted, really, what shape was that? It's strange to imagine, but I'm pretty sure that's why I keep it light gray until you start adding in sub-geometry to make it make sense, I guess. But, you know, N-gons aren't completely bad. However, do keep in mind that N-gons can increase your rendering time as of red. So that's also something to keep in mind, which is why I try to avoid it. It's just, you know, good practice. Right here, you see me try to cut, and it just doesn't make it. Try to cut again, it doesn't make it. There's a secret vert there. There's another secret vert there. There's all sorts of verts there. But, you know, not so bad. Just clear that out. Using box select with B, I'm able to just cut out pieces. So with the pieces all cut out, I'm just going to tweak and perfect and shape all of them. And cut off a piece, rejoin it to this, and subserve. Or first I'm going to just keep tweaking on the form. And dealing with some strangeness. But, you know, the knife tool is still something that I'm still new with. So you see me deal a lot with secret vertices and double edges, but I imagine that that's one of the things that fouls up people that are new to the software quite a bit. Like, for example, when I first started Blender, I used to accidentally press H and hide my objects, not know what to do, and have to start over. And then I got stuck in local mode for a lot of times. I remember the first 8 times I opened Blender, I closed it immediately. I was just too scared of what I was looking at. I was also opening 2.49, so 2.49 was just scary to look at. And so by adding subserve, I can see the form very nice throughout the subserve creasing phase. And now I'm just going to take a circle, duplicate it, turn on shrink project with my edit options below. So it's just snapping to faces with project mode. And now I have 2 circles that are now on the car. So I just join them together, make these faces a wire after removing them. Now, by using face snapping, I can completely reproject the shape of this area. And so, you know, the invisible, um, sorry, I'm at a loss of words today. Um, the invisible retopology technique that you're seeing right here, where you just take a mesh underneath, make it invisible, and just tweak all you want on top of it. This was something I began using during the Space Pirate time lapse series, in case you saw that. Um, but comes in quite handy, especially as for parts right here where I want the specific shape that I established, but I do want to add smaller details. I also could have subdivided it, deleted faces, and did it like that. However, this way I can absolutely get what I want with the most minimal amount of additional geometry added. So, you know, I'm not a master of topology, but I think I did all right for what I was going for in this particular model. So the next thing is to suck these faces in and extrude. Those are loops to, you know, add an additional crease to it. So now it's just tweaking. Sliding uneven areas at each other can reestablish the line that you're going for, which you'll see me do it a lot. I'll slide an edge all the way to another edge and then bring it back again. Adding these interior areas here will allow the pieces to, of course, look like they connect together, but can also be a pain to make connect all together. So it's something that I'm still practicing with. And so just shifting the edges at each other and adding in additional edge loops on certain edges, you can further crease them to give your surfaces these hard edges that you want. So a new mistake is often having the geometry too dense in areas and having your models, you know, come out all blocky. Um, so as you can see, more credential loops is what I call them. Just loops to, I look at it as loops that tell the other loops, hey, this guy's all right, crease them up, you know, just credential loops. Pulling them in there, snapping, knifing. And as long as they all connect and you have a nice edge loop that you can add to further crease this, the better shape you'll be in. So right here, there's some strangeness with the edge, with the geometry, and this is where there's a secret edge. You know, I hate them secret edges, but I get better at dealing with them. And this is, you know, all part of the troubleshooting your model process. But really, I think it's something I do when I model that causes these secret verts and edges. I'll find out someday, years later. But in the meantime, I'll just deal with them like a polygonal detective. We turn on a matte cap and we can just kind of have an idea what it would look like with, you know, some sort of car paint, but you can definitely see how smooth your edges are looking. And by joining them all together, I can see how they mesh together. This little environmental matte cap is pretty cool. I like this one. and I just go through each of the pieces, subsurfing, knifing, trying to make wrongs right while keeping my form. It's like being the Judge Joe Mathis of vertices, except I'm not yet, but I'm getting there. And more extrusions, more credential loops to harden up the edges that need to be hard. Now, after modeling this car, I actually went out to lunch and just looked at a bunch of cars just on the road to just kind of see what it is that make them what they are, besides, the fact that they are definitely cars. And one of the areas was this area you see bordering the top, which is creased up too heavily at this point, but I don't know that in the past, so you'll see me correct it much later. But that is also an area that you want to really give some deliberation into on whether you want it to be super hard or super soft. And by making it soft, you'll have I think, a more realistic look, but that's just my personal idea on it. So when you add in faces, sometimes you have to reapply to set smooth to get it to hit them all. And with this area, the geometry was becoming a little troublesome, but my goal here is to just get it to look the way I want, maybe not talk about it anymore. You didn't see nothing. And there's a secret vert, and there's a secret face in there. And trying to add creases in there makes it a little difficult, but the proportional editing tool at this point, as long as you're precise with your movements, you could move large parts of the car around and not disrupt the form so much that you have, what would you call that? Just unevens in your car. You know what I'm talking about, whenever you just tweak an area incorrectly and you end up with bumpy lumpies, or whatever it is that you call the areas that you contort. So from here, I'm joining all pieces together, just kind of getting an idea of what it's looking like, and now it's time to focus on the door. So with the door, I wanted to try beveling and then putting the 3D cursor at the end of that edge and then rotating it inward, so it was a gradual transition. Then the next thing is vert management, turning this part to a quad. Now on the door itself, it's the part that I feel I could have done a little bit better. However, making it was something that I still haven't had a lot of practice with. Like I said, when it comes to cars it can be a bit difficult. And so at the top where you just saw me extrude that piece out, I think that's probably one of the mistakes that will continue to haunt me for the rest of this render, of this area being rounded and just not hardening up, which I could have used edge creases. But with edge creases, sometimes you merge geometry and you lose all your crease data, and I just didn't want to deal with it and losing it down the road. So I just didn't use edge creases at all, just stuck with credential loops. Just, put a loop down in here. This area I left as a bit of an unsolved mystery for a while just to get the form, but now I'm beginning to see that I need to fill that up and create some endings for the geometry. But I'm not so worried about it yet. I'm more worried about adding the car and putting a door with the rest of the car, making it fit. And I decided to merge all of these to try to get the design to just look a little less weird. However, it is squiggly, but that's something I come back and fix much later. And now for this area, alright, so 55 minutes ago, I was trying to play PSO and was unable to log in. And I just realized my caps lock is on and now I'm playing. So, now I'm in the game. And PSO2, I know this is a Blender tutorial for me to mention it. PSO2 is the sequel to Phantasy Star Online that came out for the Sega Dreamcast and PC. It's actually free to play and is a online MMO that's being baited in Japan. So I just had to get in on that since I was such a big fan of it when it first came out, like 15 years ago or something. But enough about that. Back to the video. Sorry about that. And more creasing on the car. And whenever it comes to the tweaking, it's just making sure that the geometry has loops in the right area. But like I said, topology is something that it takes eternity to master. So I will definitely get there. But it's probably not a good idea to be playing a video game during a tutorial. So I should probably just focus on explaining this process. So for the bumper, just going in and dealing with doubles. First is to extrude a vert out so I can fill this with a face and then delete it all and just have this edge loop and extrude this portion in. And now I can just crease it in the right places. However, the geometry in this area is pandemonium. So this is something that I begin dealing with at this point. And all I'm doing is just sliding verts at other verts to get them to have a similar location so that it's not so squiggly wiggly. And now for this area, add in some credential creases, or as Jonathan Williamson would probably say, support loops. Um, and I'm just trying to select just this area and pull it in. However, it's not so easy. I mean, I could have GG and slid, but I don't think that would have worked out for something like that. Like I said, this area of the car is something that haunted me for the entire project, and I just wasn't entirely pleased with even at the end. So I need to finish, filling in this area, so let's start snapping. Of all the areas, I would probably say I was least pleased with the geometry of this area. In fact, I think I do go back and make some essential corrections to this because it starts to get a little ridiculous dealing with so much bad geometry in this area and tries and just funny shaped polygons. And because of that, it made dealing with the form a little difficult, but I start simplifying this mystery using the power of n-gons and their mysteriously shaped faces. And for simplicity's sake, I'll undo some of the edge loops I built for credentials and just connect these faces up properly. Still one n-gon, but I think I'll let that one live. So I drop in a cylinder, wonder where my options are, so I can't find them. So I use F6 to bring up the properties of a new object insert. And before you modify it, if you press F6, you can change its parameters. And by using a knife tool around the shape of that cylinder, I just cut out some faces and hide my interior loop and just begin tweaking it to just basically have the shape of a cylinder, which I could have Boolean, but you wouldn't use Boolean for that. You wouldn't use Boolean for a lot, as the way it is nowadays. It just gets messy. But not to say that it's completely worthless. It is still an important tool, just not for making a car. It's easier to just shrink wrap and deal with that yourself. So I'm going to pull this part down and make those connect at the mirror. Add in some creases after indenting a area for the trunk. And extrude these faces in. Add a face here, add edge loops to make sure the edge is in properly. And just through those hardened edges, the form starts to come together and look alright. Rotate this, and I decided to try to go for a swirly design, just to see how that would look and just put creases on it. Too hard, plus it was like an ocean design or something like that, or the outline of a fish. So I tried to think of something else. And then try to set up the area for the door handle assembly. Now, as far as door handle assemblies go, probably the easiest is to just Mustang it, or Corvette it, and just do what I almost did there, except I wanted to go for something a little bit different. And Corvetting is what I call it when you just extrude it in, shrink it, and then add perimeter loops to it, because that's just the design you see on those cars pretty much. So the back of the car is something that I went and began looking at reference images for. I still wanted to go for something somewhat original, but I needed to at least understand, how the headlight design pattern goes, so I just don't have a car that's incapable of driving on the road because it's not street legal. And so I start off by projecting a face onto it, and then tweaking it to be exactly the way I want. Now at this point, I remove the back, or not yet. At this point, I cut into it to try to imitate the design that I shrink wrapped onto it. And then take these faces and inset. hide them, select them again using L and inset, select them again and inset. And that'll just make the edges a little bit harder in this area, not so much work to have to deal with as far as creasing them. However, the back end of this car looks absolutely horrible, so not too much narration is needed on this part, since you will see me going back over it after a while and correcting it. However, I do my share of work to make it work, and it doesn't. In fact, right here, there's a strange face on the inside, and I just can't solve the enigma of why it's there. So I tried to delete all the faces and figure it out. Still can't get that sorted. Select all these edges. Wondering why my geometry is not even going the direction it's supposed to. And so I just lead out my own geometry to meet it. And so what fixes these sort of loop problems? I'll tell you, more loops. No, seriously, like I said, this part was me just giving it a shot at just making something unique, but I do go back over it and just go for a more familiar looking shape. But this car is still, of course, a heavily worked on work in progress, so still got a ways to go. Some more tweaking, I decided to go ahead and put creases in the back. Duplicate these edges, separate them, extrude them down to fit the shape, and then extrude inward. The same thing is done to the ones in the back as well. Just extruding this area inward after removing enough doubles to make it continuous. And by filling in some of these areas that are normally exposed on a work in progress car, you can definitely get it to a more showable quality. In fact, I think I put them all on Sketchfab that was of this car as it was a work in progress, and it looks horrible, but I'll change that. So for the windshield, just take 4 verts, fill them with faces, and voila. And I do the same thing here, just grab a alright, so I separate the car again and try dealing with this area. And like I said, I tweak it to make it a little bit better. And so here's my first attempt at improving it. Fill it with a face, and select 4 and just fill that with a face. And that's pretty much how I build all the windows on it. However, the windows that I used the first time are just a placeholder for me to put in a more organized, better looking window. And so at this point I'm just filling in lonely faces that just don't have a mate and are just big gaping holes, and sliding everything to get it to be in the correct location. And so here you see me adding in the little area that's going to hold the rear view mirror, and pretty much just projected a plane and shrink wrapped it on, and then from there just extruded out and inset extruded in, and then added the loops in addition to the subsurf to give it a better shape. And so I'm just looping the rear view mirror in advance because I already know, and as you can see, by putting loops in correct places I can get a pretty contoured shape that's actually exactly what I want as far as like the level of control. So the bottom of it I want to be rounded, and the top be a little bit harder. And just extruding inward just so this will have some sort of lights on the mirrors. And then I put a loop there so I can hopefully go back and put a little inset these to harden up the forms. And you know, by adding rear view mirror, by adding side mirrors, it adds a lot to the car. So at this point I'm pretty proud of myself, and I decided to try rendering out to see what it looks like. Now whenever it comes to materials, I have begun working on dealing with assets instead of making everything manually, because making things manually every time is insane. So instead, I have the paint materials file from BlendSwap that I use on pretty much everything that requires a car style material. and I just import it in, and voila, car material, already looking good. And go ahead and just put quick shaders on everything, just see what result I get. Now the tire was something I also modeled previously and was actually pleased with, so it's something I stuck with for this particular model. However, as you can see, since I am freestyling a car, I'm not yet smart enough to realize that the tires are way too small. So I scale them up at this time, and these tires are still too small. In fact, I went on Google and looked up a picture of a man next to a tire because, in fact, for the car, the first time I modeled it, I put just a base mesh metal in it, and then used the standard modeling tools to shape him as if he was sitting in a driver's seat, and then built the car around him. So you'll see me bring the little guy back later, and he'll just be like a placeholder just to make sure that the car is usable by a human. I could also import a bear, make sure it's usable by a bear. But by adding tires, I'm able to, maybe show off the car at this point. And just by adding in a plane, extruding up, selecting the back edge, and then using the control B to bevel and then rolling the mouse wheel, I can create a quick generic stage for this to sit on. And of course, the car does need something to reflect. So I create some little, I call them light bars, but basically they'll light the scene, not be visible to the camera. Under my render settings, I set my clamp to 0.7 and my filter glossy to 1. And by doing so, I sacrifice a little bit of glossy reflections for the reduction of fireflies. And then for the clamp, I sacrifice a little bit of accuracy for a little bit of better quality, especially for a 50 frame render. And so voila, this is what we're looking like at this point. So it looks pretty good, except the tires are really small and the windshield is kind of big. In fact, only in retrospect am I able to see these sort of things. And now I decide to color some parts differently, maybe give it a more attractive look. I try it with gray, I try it with blue. It looked awful. But with the materials, I was just goofing off. After working on a car for so long, I needed to change up the pace because you model forever and start making you crazy. And so I like to jump over to the materials a little bit, maybe play with some compositing just to keep my mind working. This part sticks out from what I was seeing, so I go in and correct that. And as long as I just keep the interpolation between the edges good, I'm able to work with it. I also select two faces, inset extrude, extrude inside, and then add edge loops to kind of add a little visual interest to the door. In this area also add a intake for, I guess, like a air intake. So add some credential loops there, add a crease here, and let's see, we'll duplicate this area, cut it out, extrude it upwards, shape it downward, make it look like a mouse a little bit, add more detail, and this will be OnStar, the antenna, so it looks like a remote controlled car. Delete the green, delete the green material. We don't need a green antenna. So this part of the car I've actually never modeled before. The area where you see the windshield wipers and um, I don't even know what the part is called, but I take a crack at this by just shrink wrapping a plane and projecting it down on it, mirroring it, and then extruding it down. And it's because I added all these little visual additions to the car to make it more like a car and less like a simplified noob creation. I prematurely gave myself the idea that maybe I was done, but you know, you're not done, and the work goes on. So I use individual extrude to bring them in, and then just add my credential loops to harden them up, and that'll give me a very nice little front part there. So I select my man from my um, mesh massive, and so I decided to choose the cat head and make a hood ornament. Add a material to it and choose his eyeballs. Make them emissive, because everybody loves kitties. So there's some strangeness here with the geometry, or I forgot to set my selection mode to be back to what it originally was, but instead I just fill it with a face and then just extrude it down and work on the shape here. And just work on, you know, my idea on what a hood ornament of a cat would look like. And I started looking at the windshield wipers and decided that my car also can use a pair of windshield wipers to, you know, make it look better. And you know, all these small knickknacks really are simple and easy to model. It's just a combination of all of them together. It's what brings this model together. So, you know, all the stuff that I make here, I'm pretty much gonna add to an asset massive, add to an asset massive file, so that way I can just grab pieces of cars that I've made and just begin, you know, kit bashing it, because speed is speed is essential. Speed is where it's at. I want to be the fastest modeler, and then I want to be the fastest scene builder, and you know that's pretty much my goal. I may not be able to be the best modeler, but maybe I could be the fastest. I mean, this isn't me real time or anything, but you know, actually, I'm pretty quick at this, I think, compared to other people. But what really helps is experimenting and studying other packages, because they'll show you workflows using tools that Blender don't have, and enhance you as an artist by showing you ways that you can be thinking outside the box and get solutions with less work. Not to say that, you know, Blender lacks all the education, but you know, when it comes to learning these things, just venturing out and not being so close-minded will definitely help you improve your skills a lot quicker. So, you know, when it comes to a car, they have a face, or at least I think so. You know, the two headlights plus the mesh kind of makes a face. You know, Camrys look kind of sad. Jeeps have kind of a harsh, stern kind of face. I don't know, maybe I'm just rambling nonsense, but my car has the mouth of a hillbilly. In fact, that's what I was thinking when I put in all these teeth, like, her. But I add in a curve and just curve to form, and now they all fit. However, the curve has to be tweaked, but that's easier than proportional editing all the little pieces. And then by just mirroring that, I have my car. And so now part 6. Part 6 is what I actually consider part 2 of this whole thing. Because I made the first car, made the first video, 700 people watched it, and I was just so taken aback that I realized maybe I should spend a lot more time making cars and crafts and stuff. And maybe I'll get more views. So for this part, I realized that there's a lot of tweaking that has to be done. So this is what I consider my stage 2, me just getting it right. So I'm looking at hoods and I begin to realize that on my hood I can begin to add a little visual interest to it by just putting in more interest in front. But of course I have to add all these credential loops to not break my smooth factor I got going. However, in this area, I think some topological mistakes caused me to have a bit harder of a time with this than necessary. But I actually like this particular front end, which instead of deleting it, I ended up duplicating it, moving it to another layer down the road, and just making another one in its place. But as you can see, just to get this area to look right required just a lot of tweaking, but in the end, I don't think I completely understood exactly what caused this to happen. But really, you just got to work with it until it looks the way that you want. Sometimes even just delete invisible, retopo it to just get the form with geometry that you personally agree with. And I just call that a day. This part is the wrong color. This part needs to be emissive. This part needs to also be a different color. And so does that part. The cat is the wrong size. There needs to be a headlight in the front. However, this headlight is just a placeholder because headlights and the reflectors are really what sells these models. So expect me to be coming back with another video showing y'all how I go over making the final headlights and reflectors for it, because it can be quite a pain to get this to look right, and it will, break your model if you don't have it right. So these are just placeholders. With pretty much all my models, I kind of have a workflow of building the base and then going over it in what I call level 2, which is where I just strengthen up the forms that I'm going for. And then after that, it's just free reign where either I take it into sculpting, go into compositing, begin making variants, and just go from there and work towards a final result. Um, but maybe everyone's workflow is the same. But the way that you choose to go about making these things is definitely an important part as far as determining whether it's successful or not. But like you may have seen in my Blenderman series, you can interchange some of the steps and keep your inspiration alive without driving yourself crazy. Model a little bit, rig a little bit, just working on different aspects of it. But maybe it only happens to me. And y'all ever blend until your eyes hurt, or blend until you just can't actually use your computer anymore and you have to go to sleep because you have a migraine? I don't know. Maybe it's because my monitor is too big. So I'm building a back spoiler here, and as you can see, for building all these little additional parts, it's just easier to just take a face, duplicate it, and just take it into my own world and do whatever I want with it. And that's precisely what you see me do here. And so adding more perimeter loops to the spoiler to just, of course, make it more strict, because subsurfing just will smooth out anything. And I think adding a spoiler definitely plus 5 points to the overall form, because without it I think it was lacking. Also, this area I wasn't entirely happy with, so I try to just add some like visual cues to just make it look more unique. However, that requires that I guess just leave it alone. I figured I'd go back and add some perimeter loops on it, since it was showing uneven grays is what I call that. Now right here I'm just using lasso select to pull it in and make the wheels fit a little bit better. And with proportional editing and having to fall off just right, you can move quite a few things at this point and not mess up your shape, which is kind of what happens if you just tweak things without really thinking it through. So I look at some car doors and assemblies just to see kind of, what I'm looking at here. And so I take the easy way out, just inset it, build a handle. But I also try to add a little bit more to it than just this, and put like a keypad or something, because, like I said, it is a concept car, so I want to make it somewhat unique. And let's drop that big banana in the hole. There we go. And select to color those, uncolor that, and we'll just call that the door for now. Extrude this area out, paint it gray. I'm gonna just try to make my own button, bring in a square, inset extrude, drag it in, delete the back, try to add some credential loops to get it to look right. And of course, paint this part with an emission so that lights up. Now, for some reason, at the end of the model, I don't know what happened to my keypad here, but I lost it. So it's probably hidden or on a different layer, or accidentally deleted it. But this is probably the birth and death of the keypad. And I decided to add a little panel to it as well. So it's like, wrong entry will kill you. And I'm just tweaking it to fit. Rotate, rotate on the X, rotate on the Z. There we go. Harden up the loops. There are some parts with this area I didn't like. So Control Plus will grow your selection if you select something. So you see me use that quite a bit. At this point, you're seeing me use it just to control the materials, because creating faces on bordering edges and faces that have different materials can sometimes cause you to get a random colored material. Alright, now, which part is this? Okay, I'm on part 6. So I think this series all in all is a total of 8 parts. So doing horrible on time, but we're getting through this. I promised I'd come through and narrate it. So I'm just going to explain this all in one go. look at the front ends of cars and then take a real hard look at mine and realize that there's a lot that I got to do. So extruding willy-nilly with a perimeter loop around it like so will not give you a happy ending like I'm seeing here. So there's a couple ways I could have went about it. This is the one I chose. Make a little mini grill. Not the best choice. I don't completely agree with it, so that's something I'll probably be removing in the future. But I'm just tweaking it to see what I can come up with here and create a little grill for the front. It's just a 45-degree rotated plane with its insides removed, arrayed, solidified, and then curved. Which curving things is, it's just the bee's knees. It just comes in handy. Fences, this, anything, roller coasters, anything you can array on a curve. I mean, the more things you array on a curve, the better. And go ahead and try to shade the inside area, make it look a little more interesting. Like I said, this area too is just me trying to just come up with something. Not agreeable. Change that back to green. Change that back to gray. And what do? I come in and render it again. Now at this point I also feel that I probably got overexcited about being this far in the model and it not looking like an absolute piece of rubbish. So as celebration, I stopped there and call that done. But it's not truly done. In fact, I come back in the next one and deal with it. So, concept car 7. This is where it starts really getting good. I take the interior of one of my failures, hide all the windows. Use it in Blender. Now you can copy and paste with Control C and Control V. Imagine that. So in Windows 7, if I want to open a second instance of Blender, I just right click the program and then choose the Blender icon in case you didn't know how to open more than one, because you click the icon, it'll just bring up the program that you already have up. So by opening another instance of Blender, now you can actually Control C a mesh and then Control V, but it will put it on the same layer that it was in the other file. So right now I'm dealing with him on layer 1 and this interior piece on layer 3, I think, or something, or in local view at this point. And as you see, it's just a real simplified interior, so nothing real fancy here. I just pretty much extruded and slid everything to where you see it now. So the interior is something I don't think I finished in this that I'll be finishing in this particular video. However, I will be making a decent interior because I feel the need to at least make a car that I can see the inside of and the outside, or even make a render of a shot going from the inside to the outside. And then just have that as an asset for the future. So I start building the little inside area of the door. So when you look into the car, you're not seeing the inside of the outside of the door. And using F2 and edge slide, I'm able to fill all these faces. Put an edge here so I can fill that face. And more face filling. I think during this part of the video I actually cut it short because I started getting a bunch of interruptions from visitors, but it is something I am going to come back and finish. Because you know, you don't see a lot of videos talking about the interiors of cars. Only video I was able to find about it was in Maya and Modo and a paid one for Blender. And there's nothing wrong with paid Blender tutorials, you know. I'm a big supporter of the Blender tutorial industrial complex, as y'all probably hear me mention all the time. Fill in the back because this part is not supposed to just be exposed like that. But you know, last time I left the car rendering, one of the things that I felt hurt the overall model was the fact that you can't even see an interior of the car. So I decided to build a new back window because that one was not good. And I just tweak it to fit. And there's still a lot of things about the back that I don't like, but they are things that I do come back and improve, like this part. So as you can see, it's a lot of tweaking, even with the curves being established, and what would I consider to be close to the final form, even when I first filled in all the faces, just to get that last bit of detail happening requires so much tweaking and just mesh management to a level that, you know, I'm not really used to. So now I'm looking at car interiors and I try to find a seat that I like. I'd look up car seats and it brings up baby seats, tons of baby seats. So I look at this seat here, move it to my other screen, and I decide to duplicate a piece, delete half, put a mirror modifier, and then make the original seat wire so I can build the upgraded seat inside of it just to keep the form. So the wire is more like a guide for me during this stage of modeling the car seat. Just duplicate 8 edges, fill them with faces. Easier than just inserting a plane, especially if you already have the edges that you're about to bring in exactly where you want. So I put the little arm area here. And then I get a brilliant idea to select it and then add an inset extrude, and that'll give me an edge loop to actually control that area's detail, which you'll see in a moment. This part I was actually quite proud of, especially since I've never made a automotive seat before. And so this will also be a nice asset to use for spaceships, for horses. You know, might put a car seat on a horse. Maybe. I might. And just more tweaking. Knifing in the areas that I want to have a certain detail added in, then removing it in favor of quadding it. So at 2 hours, we are still here modeling this car. And I'm still here explaining it to you. So adding increases to further solidify some of the shapes here, and then just using Alt S as far as scaling them out on the normals to try to get some poofiness in it. I'm able to get the form that I want pretty easily within the dimensions that I specify. So at this point I decide to select all these pieces and add an inset, and by adding that inset I'm allowed an extra degree of control for how these areas slide. So this is what I meant when I said I was particularly proud of this piece, because um, making a cool car seat looks like it would be pretty hard, but this is the best way I think I could have went about it and put in my perimeter loops and crease loops and get rid of doubles, which by now you see that I'm the doubles master. I can get those puppies the hell out of there. Like a Vietnam POW. And so more tweaking, more inserting, and every loop that I'm adding is merely for an extra degree of control as far as the final form goes. So at this point I had to make a group in order to be able to reselect this area and add an inset extrude because, like I said, sometimes during the hardcore modeling binges I have, I sometimes just kind of, I don't know, my brain goes to sleep and I'll just I'll come to and realize I've been tweaking the same thing for about 30 minutes and I realize it's probably time to do something else. So I delete the old seat because now it's irrelevant. And I add in the new seat. And just the seats alone begin helping the form look up. And so of course I add in a little cylinder to hold it up and then bring out a little piece to hold that like you normally see on cars if you've pulled the seats off out of being bored in a car. And I realized that the mirror modifiers on it, so I was actually applying it double. So it does have an exhaust pipe, and the bottom's also exposed. So this is something I noticed on Sketchfab, was that the fact that if you looked at my car underneath, it was empty inside. And that is a big sign of, I guess, being a noob. So I go and begin filling that in, and you got to fill it in with something for now. So I duplicate all the edges that, due to parameter, I begin removing doubles to decimate it, simplifying it, removing edge loops, getting it as simple as I can possibly get it. Deleting all this garbage. And building this whole thing was pointless because I end up tweaking the wheels again because, like I said at the beginning, they are definitely not the right size. So, you know, when you're making a car, making one up is a great idea until you start realizing that you've broken some of the rules that cars probably have for a reason, like size and entry methods and stuff like that. Like you see, even on a concept car page, some of those cars you can't get in it unless the door is that good. But I mean, on most of them, you don't even have to put through the work of making a complex door because in the future, you teleport inside of a car or however you get into it. And more tweaking. As you can see, since the faces are on top of each other in some areas underneath, it's created some doubles, but now I see the tires need to be bigger. That much bigger. And I look at the tires in the pictures and compare to scales, and I see that it's about that big. And if the car is really low and should just be moved up, and then after tweaking this area to fit the wheels again, and it's surprising how many times I can reshape this without destroying the form above it, but that's just the power of proportional editing. And I duplicate the tire again, this time with Alt-D, so it's a linked duplicate, and I can change the materials of one tire or even four and not have to worry so much about particular things. See, I'm already starting to get loopy from dealing with the same video for 2 hours. And I've been talking the whole time. And as a man who talks for a living, talking can be tedious. But if I don't finish this and do a narrated version soon, then I'll never make one because things on my to-do list just never make it. In fact, I already have tutorials that are in back order that I was supposed to have uploaded months ago, like making lotus flowers and some ArcViz stuff that I still haven't done yet, all because I want to go back through and narrate it. So maybe I should start going back to narrating the stuff as I make it instead of doing it in post like I have been. However, just modeling and not having to talk at the same time does allow me to focus and work a lot faster. But so instead of just dealing with those edges, I just decided to just um, extrude them over to the other side to make it fit. But really it's the under part of the car, so it doesn't matter so much. This part does matter. And now I decide to add the exhaust. So I drop in a plane, get it to the shape of a candy bar chocolate, inset, extrude inwards, perimeter loop, surrounding loop, credential loop, and then scale it up. And there, now I have an exhaust pipe. So the back of the car, like I said, I did not like it. I ended up tweaking it. Here's a technique that I used to use in the internal that I didn't know worked in cycles now. You can cut a mesh out, give it an internal material, make it transparent. Under your display options, make it show transparency, and then instead of retopologizing around a wire mesh, you can retopologize around a glass semi-transparent mesh, which may work a little bit better for you instead of having to see the other wires messing you up. So I go and look up tail lights, and the first picture that shows is Andrew Price. Wow, that's when you know that you're big in Blender, when your images are in Google search results. So when I was retopologizing, I projected it and it projected it onto faces. So what I did was undid that, filled in the faces, and then made these actually fit. So I'm still trying to go for an original shape here. However, I think I was a bit lazy with it, but like I said, this was a very long modeling session. So, and I always try to do these things in one sitting like a crazy person. Like I read about these people that are like, yeah, I worked on a render for 9 months or 6 months, and I need to get to that level where I'm able to deal with the same files every day, or be able to work on a project that long. But it's hard to reopen a file that's old, especially if it's a model that you have in a dense scene, and there's all sorts of modifiers making it slow. Like I get files that I've opened from the past and I just can't open them again because there's modifiers. Blender's changed so much that the file's just broken. I'm lucky if I'm able to reach in and grab my assets back out. So, maybe working with the same file is possible if you're a user of another package, but with Blender, this program changes a lot. More than any other program. They change more than Leap. And Leap is always putting out an update, adding a new feature, breaking my code. So at this point, I bring that to meet, shrink it down to 1 vert, and now it's just a matter of making connections. So I delete the wrong part. That's not the part I wanted to delete. There we go. Let's see. I've been listening to the same playlist for duration of this video. I think that's part of what's driving me crazy. So even as of this tutorial, I still didn't finish the back end of the car. That's something that I wanted to focus on exclusively, since most cars you look at from the front, and for most of the cars that I make, I actually don't feel like I give it enough time in the back to make it look good. So it's like a dreadful view to look at the back of the car. But I am determined to change that and add something to make this more interesting. But from the front, it's definitely got it going. But I want a car that I can show from the front, from the back, and I'm looking at the different designs for lights and whatnot. Realize that there's some parts that need to be tweaked in here. And now shading for the seat. For this, I use fairly basic materials. In fact, boring materials that I named boring, and created a simple gray, and then went in and just created a whiter version of boring so that the car seat would have a more interesting shading, because the goal of making it is definitely to see it through the windshield now and not just have a black reflective car. So the man was in the scene. Gotta get rid of him. The car paint texture is one that Jonathan Williamson used during the Blender Inside Out tutorial series on one of them. So usually when it comes to materials, I just either spend time looking at someone whose material is better so I can imitate it, or just use a preset material, because my library is actually pretty big. I grab them from everywhere that I can. And there's a couple of things I don't like. That part right there particularly caught my eye. This was sticking out so bad that it looked like the car may have been built by a disgruntled worker. Same with this part here in the hood. So I tweaked that back down to get it to flush. Some parts you just don't want sticking up like that. Right here, I see that I need to make these meet better. So I try to reduce some of the creasing. However, I think I get a fairly decent job done with it. And my car is just too pink and not very car painty looking. So you can see a reflection on the on the window over there of a tree, and that's because for the HDRI, I'm actually using Blender Cookie HDRIs that they had released online for free. So I went ahead and just grabbed those, since it was a very nice scene that was Creative Commons and not licensed. So I duplicate the cars and put them on the other side, and notice that Control M is not working again. So I talk about this all the time, but Control M is mirror. If you want to just mirror something on X, mirror it on Y. Sometimes you can press Control M and then the axis, and it'll actually go there. But sometimes it breaks in between versions, and because I go with the builder.blender.org snapshots, sometimes I break it in between every version or something. But it's just strange. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And so this is where I replaced the hood. To replace the hood, I selected the prominent vertices that created the form and just filled them in with faces. It sounds easy enough. I look at this and realize it's not. Adding some edges, extrude down, harden it. And because of difficulties with the edge loops and the edge structure I just now created that's already working against me, that I for some reason did not bother to fix in this video, it's become a little harder to work with. But as you can see, I managed to work it into shape. But like I said, this is definitely not my best attempts at topology. In fact, I know I could have probably done a better job if I took a break and then came back to it. But even though my edge flow is in pandemonium, I do try to come through and make some sense of it all. So whenever the edges stop, it can be because of a secret double or a secret edge or a secret vert. So those are things you always got to be worried about. Pretty soon I'll sound like a conspiracy theorist talking about these Illuminati vertices that are out to get us. Or, like Alex Jones, buy water filters, don't drink the water. And so this is my new hood. And I'm just going to go look at some hoods and just see what kind of designs are looking interesting to me. And sometimes you can just actually just clear some of this up by just going through and removing some of the doubles that you create in the process of trying to add credential loops, because sometimes you'll find that a loop just doesn't have much use, like right there. It's sometimes easy to just simplify it and then go back in again and deal with it. So I put the matte cap on, it looked strange, so I realized that my normals were inside out. And using the matte cap, I'm able to go in and just create a nice shape for the hood while making sure that it looks certainly smooth enough, and by adding in bevels and pulling them up on the Z and doing a little vertice magic, I'm able to create a tri-grill. Alright, so this hood I think I'll stick with. Remove this piece, and now to build the interior of the inside, because you shouldn't be able to see the metal roof from the inside. And this seemed like it would be an easy task. The only thing easy is it was easier said than done. As you can see here, vertice confusion due to inconsistent loop work caused me to have to go through and rework some areas and tweak them to better fit. And the goal here is to, of course, be quick, but also to just prevent myself from modeling myself into a corner later with these sort of things. But as you can see, since I've added so many perimeter loops and credential loops and made it more complex, that the process of dealing with this just isn't as easy as it used to be. And this is something I probably could have dealt with all the way back during the curve stage, and have built an interior and made plans for all these features and just went from there. So, if you learn anything from this tutorial, it's give curves a try. Curves might just be the thing you were missing your whole life. And cut this piece off, or don't, leave it attached. And using F2 to jump my way through all these loops is just a godsend. Like I said, the tool works phenomenal, and is probably one of my favorite add-ons since the Inset Extrude, which at the time it was released was actually pretty hot. And I think before that it was probably B surfaces, and then before that it was just B mesh. Like, as far as like great modeling improvements that completely changed everything. So right here, I just take a piece out, duplicate it, separate it with P, add in some loops while removing loops that don't add much to the form, and begin tweaking this out. And we're almost up to the present and where I am in the car before I actually have to begin working on it again. So I should probably get up, pop my fingers, and get ready to do some car modeling, brother. And selecting with the lasso, pulling them in. This part I was particularly not pleased with, especially because of just how inconsistently they look from an angle. In fact, it's like buck teeth. In fact, why does a car need two sets of these? But that's okay. I'll go back and fix that. But yeah, at this point, I think I've actually made the car look strange, and maybe I should just model something after a traditional front end. But no, I just continue doing whatever I want. And I decided the front end needs some work. Like I said, radical changes being made all throughout the model, even compared to the first form. The first form is just to get you started, because you model it in Blender, you don't have a reference, you're just free modeling, you're just thinking and modeling without any guides. It gets lonely, and your files usually end up a disaster, right? Like, curves was how I formulated my plan for attack for everything that you're seeing here and all throughout the video. So, maybe you should try tracing reference images with curves, or tracing a car's reference images with curves, and then using the same technique, which was how I saw it originally. But I think I'd much rather work on trying to make a car without the use of any image, so that way I don't have to worry about the immense pressure of having to live up to that car's standards, I guess, 'Cause if I modeled a Mustang and I didn't look like a Mustang, then that would probably be a bad model. So more tweaking, just try to add interest to the form. And I think I like that idea of a front end better. However, that part is just atrocious. Just atrocious. Wish I could go back in time and punch me while making that, being like, that looks bad. Because it did. So now I'm just like, alright, I'll look at steering wheels. That's the steering wheel I chose, a concept drawing of one. So I drop in a circle, can't find those options, dango options, there it is up there. However, that hid it for some reason. Drop in a circle, give it 12 verts, scale it in. And it's just a matter of just tweaking and getting it all to fit. Of course, rotate it by 45 degrees so I can select these in a perfect pattern. Holy mackerel, this is a long video. My hats go off to all who watch this. And of course, I have much thanks for my 1,400 subscribers, and thank you all for the 284,000 views that further push me to continue making tutorials. If you all have an idea or a particular request, of course, just let me know. I'm always looking for a way to have more interaction with the people of the community instead of just putting out these videos all the time. Like, for example, there's actually a show on the web called Meshed Up, where a panel of artists use ZBrush in a live webcast, and then every 20 minutes they send the mesh to each other for further tweaking. And it's a pretty fun show to watch. The people are real talented, but I think something like that for Blender would be a little interesting, a little live, uh, Blendertainment, not so much a contest, but just a collaborative session where everybody's weak points and strengths can be exploited and used in a team-based project that was done in real time with everyone working at the same time. Because I mean, one of the things hardest in Blender, I guess, is collaborating with other artists because of differences in style and technique and even skill levels. So, I definitely would like to do some stuff on that. So if you're interested in possibly being a part of that, just let me know. And in addition to that, I'm also looking into getting a website. So, like I said, I won't be up on YouTube as much. And maybe I can even present my tutorials in a way that hasn't been done before. Instead of you clicking a video, you would be clicking a portion of a render that would then bring up a video showing you that part being made, or something along those lines. But I definitely want to make my own personal style of making tutorials. Alright, this song's horrible. So we're on the steering wheel, and we're just moving along here. And continuing on with the video. In fact, now it says I have 701 views on the curved car study. So yes, that is most excellent. Having that many views amassed in such a short period of time makes me wonder if I've just been doing tutorials all wrong, and if there's just something else that I should be focusing on instead of character creation. For building a rearview mirror, I just felt it was pretty self-explanatory. I spent a lot of time looking at them. So the man is just a placeholder. He, of course, has no place in the. And so the lighting of the scene was something that I felt was pretty distressing. The initial lighting was done through HDRI image, and I try to go in and add in a hemi light and a sunlight to try to give control to the shadows. Also duplicate the floor area of the car and give it an emission and make it invisible to put some light underneath the car, but I felt that was too import. So I undo that, of course. And voila. So now this car compared to where I thought I finished the first time is definitely looking a lot better. So the main thing at this point is for me to definitely realize that it's not done. I could call this done and try to parade this as if it's something great. However, much tweaking is needing to be done. I'm still not pleased with the hood or the front end, but that's something I'll go back and tweak. This part was sticking out, which was particularly atrocious, but we correct that. The interior of the doors for some reason was bright orange and are sticking out because of insufficient edge credentials locking them into the exact shape that I want. So I removed the HDRI and then put it back to get some interesting environmental lighting and reflections happening on the vehicle. And just allow that to render. So I believe this is actually where I leave off on this series, but while I may have been hard on myself about the way that I constructed the car, I am furthermore pleased with the way that it did come out and look forward to making more cars in the future as soon as I get this one right. So with that, happy blendering. And this is another tutorial produced by your favorite Blendertainment administrator, Master Xeon. Over and out.